Hey there, entrepreneur. Welcome back to another fascinating episode of Fascinating Founders. I'm your host, Nicole Holland, and I'm thrilled to be your guide as we dive in and uncover the stories that came before the success of some of the world's most fascinating founders. Hailing from a multitude of industries and socioeconomic starts, you're going to learn what's made these fascinating men and women realize their dreams from an inspired idea to millions in revenue, disrupting, innovating, and impacting humanity for the better. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Podcasting Goldmine. Are you reaching and converting your ideal buyers through podcasts yet? You'd better believe that your competition is. The podcast industry is exploding right now, with billions of dollars being poured into it and well over 1 million active podcasts in the directories. In just the past 90 days alone, hundreds of thousands of new podcasts have been added, and the industry will continue to grow whether or not you're a part of it. Your market, my friend, is listening to podcasts, and I would love to personally help you design a strategic podcast marketing plan to help your company scale and reach your business growth goals through podcasts. From getting you featured as the expert guest on premium podcasts that your ideal buyers are already listening to designing and launching a profitable podcast for your company, to show sponsorship and advertising. Podcasting for business growth is totally my jam. If you're ready to take a serious look at how you can effectively leverage podcasts for business growth, visit podcastinggoldmine.com and request a complimentary consultation for us to explore how we can make podcasts work for you. Again, that URL is podcastinggoldmine.com. Now, you never know what we're going to get into on an episode of Fascinating Founders. So get your notebook ready, cozy up with a great cup of joe, and let's dive into another inspiring journey with today's guest. Today, my friend Jana is joining me. He is an impact-driven entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and media host who's passionate about using capitalism and business to make the world a brighter place. In 2015, Raj founded Java Press, a lifestyle brand on a mission to transform ordinary coffee rituals into extraordinary daily experiences. As a partner of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Java Press has donated over $50,000 to children with life-threatening illnesses. Raj is also the founder of Stay Grounded, a global podcast, education platform, and social media movement, helping thousands of people realize and leverage the tools that they already have to achieve happiness, success, and fulfillment in daily life. And it is always such a pleasure to connect with Raj, and I'm excited to have him here today. How's it going, Raj?
I'm super good. How are you, Nicole?
Fantastic. And I'm really excited to dive into your fantastic journey of how you took an idea, a concept from zero to mid-market. So let's start out with back at the beginning when you were little Raj. What is it that you really wanted to be when you grew up? What was your, as far back as you can remember, the trajectory that you believed you were going to follow as a young man growing up?
I wanted to be a professional athlete, actually a tennis player. I was a super competitive tennis player growing up. It was my life. I mean, everything was revolving around the tennis court. And so just remember growing up, watching people at Wimbledon and just seeing the face of triumph when underdogs won. I don't know. It was just a really, really, really powerful visual for me. And so my entire life, I always actually wanted to be a professional athlete. So that was my pipe dream growing up and the thing that drove me.
Awesome. But what point did you say, maybe I have something different that I should be focused on?
Yeah, so I played a lot in high school, nationally ranked, and I dedicated a lot of my life to playing tennis. And I was actually really good at school too. So I had great grades and, I was good at tennis, but I was able to get into better schools if I wasn't going to play tennis. And so I made the decision to put up my racket begrudgingly because my parents wanted me to go to a better academic school and I wanted to play tennis. But at the end of the day, it felt like the right decision at the time, even though it broke my heart. And so I ended up putting up my tennis racket way before I was ready to do so, which led to a whole slew of me really searching for meaning when I got to college. Like when I got to college, now I was at the University of Texas. I didn't have this identity of an athlete to put myself on. And I didn't have that. So I had to try and fill that void with something else. And that's when I got to college, organizations, fraternities, I ended up launching my own fraternity at UT. And that was like my way of doing something special, because I felt like my entire high school career, middle school career, elementary school, like I was always looking to use sports as a vehicle to do something great. And now I didn't have that. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want to just join something. I want to try and do something that's going to empower me to do something great. Yeah, it's weird. I guess like something that I was so sad and mad about, letting go of tennis and moving to college and trying something new, how that created the perfect recipes and the ingredients for the cocktail of like entrepreneurship or starting something new or trying something different to emerge onto the platform. So
I love it. So let's dig into that fraternity idea just a little bit, because I'm guessing it's not like, hung up the racket. What can I do? Oh, I'm going to just start a fraternity of my own. And then all the things fell into place. However, it couldn't have taken too long since you did it during your college, university career. So I'm curious about the evolution from when you came to the awareness that you wanted to create something or wanted to create specifically a fraternity, to the actual figuring out how to do that, to the implementation, to the actual launching and creation of that, and then beyond that. Can you walk us briefly through?
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't plan on any of it. I'll be honest. Like I came to college not really knowing what to expect. Like I knew what to say no to. Like I was going to rush parties. I was hanging out. I was meeting people. I knew what to say no to. But then one of my friends, he introduced me to a friend who was thinking about chartering a fraternity. And he was like, hey man, this is a cool thing. It's like, I want to do this. And I went to just learn more about it, and it just something rung about it. And I was like, hey, this feels like the right thing to do. So I'm going to say yes. And that has been a pretty emergent theme, I think, in my journey, is like being open-minded to opportunities and kind of intuitively knowing and feeling that I don't have all the answers. Like I have a plan. And it, really honestly, in high school and growing up, like I always had that plan, like that plan to become this thing, this athlete. And that didn't work out. And so now I was kind of, for the first time in my life, without a plan. I really didn't know what I wanted. I even came into college undeclared. Like I didn't know what my major was going to be. So I came in not knowing what my major was. I was just kind of going with the flow and learning. And, engineering was what my parents really pushed on me. And so I was trying to get into the engineering school, but I didn't know. And so I think that was a pretty formative place for me. Like just having so much choice and being aware of so much. Like I was in a bubble growing up. Like I really didn't have a lot of awareness of what was out there. So when I went to college, I mean, University of Texas has 50,000 students. So it's a massive school, big city, way different than where I grew up. I mean, it was just so much. So I think getting to school and kind of allowing myself to say yes to things that I think I might like became pretty obvious and clear. And so that's how it started there. And then we had to learn a lot. I had 8 other line brothers. We all had to like figure it out. Like I didn't really know how to rush kids. I didn't know how to throw parties. I didn't know how to do any of it. So it's a lot of learning along the way and a lot of leadership in that. Like, so I think that was the first place where I really learned guerrilla marketing in a lot of ways, like really kind of learning how to like get people to buy into something that was so small when there were so many other established sort of Greek organizations at school. So it kind of taught me how to sell in a lot of ways, like sell myself. It taught me how to leverage, how to put together events, how to make us look bigger than we were. Like in a lot of ways, like it was a lot of stuff that is applicable, very applicable to starting any business and building social proof and creating sort of like a mass frenzy around something we're doing. But that I kind of accidentally fell into that, and I loved it. I mean, I learned more launching my fraternity than I did getting a petroleum engineering degree. Like that was the best like soft skill development I could have ever asked for, was just being so social and taking something that I just taking something and trying to turn it into something. Like I didn't know what that was, but it was that middle ground that created such a great recipe for learning.
Amazing.
And still attribute a lot of what I have today to that.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the spark for what you have today, because that came about during college. Yeah. How did you come up with the idea for Java Press? What was it?
So it actually wasn't so weirdly, like when I graduated college, I got a full, really high paying job in the oil and gas industry right out of school. I moved to New Orleans and I started working for Chevron. And I was making great money, but there was something missing for me. 4 years of college where I was like constantly trying to put something on the map, like trying to make this thing big. Like I love the thrill of it. And for the first time in my life, I went to now a really, really, really like big company where there's lots of processes. Things are slow. Like it just felt boring. And I felt like something was missing and I didn't really know what that was. And I couldn't really put a name to it until I remember like the first year I was in and, I was getting ready for performance reviews and I did more work than any of my peers. And I still was told to wait my turn to get something I wanted. That's when I realized I was like, okay, that antsiness is coming from me not being in control, not having some element of like, I want to do these with my hands. And so that's when I started really getting into like just learning about entrepreneurship. I remember, so I graduated 2013. So November of 2014 is when I was like fed up. And I remember going back home for Thanksgiving. And I remember seeing the 4-Hour Work Week in a library not a library, but one of those bookstores at the airport. And it was like, escape the 9 to 5, live your dream life. I was like, that's exactly what I want. It was like speaking to me. It had a little palm tree on it. And I was like, that's what I want right now. So I remember buying the book and I finished it in like a day because I was so fascinated with this guy. This is the first time I'd ever heard of anybody retiring every 3 months. Like this guy was like working, the Pareto principle. And I was just like, what is this madness? This guy is hacking the hell out of life. And it's something so far removed from what I had learned from my parents, from my mentors, from my college years, like something I just never knew. So that started then like my addiction with buying courses and like teaching myself marketing. I bought a course that teaches people how to start a software company from scratch. I bought like Facebook ads consulting. I bought, you name it. I bought just about all these different courses because I was making a lot of money. But I had the budget to spend on education. And so I just started taking all my discretionary income and buying courses and teaching myself all this stuff and reading books. And then along the way, that's when I stumbled across one of my first courses that actually made me money, which was a course that taught people how to sell products on Amazon. So find product from China, private label them, create a brand, put them on Amazon, make money. And that was like gist of the formula with a lot of red tape in the middle. But like the gist of it was that I bought that course in June of 2015. And then by September of 2015, we had our first product for JavaPress launched, which was a manual coffee grinder. Initially, we didn't have a patent on it. We just bought like a private label generic design and slapped our logo on it and put it up. Yeah, and then that's the start. That's how it started. It really didn't start from me having an idea. It started from me knowing what I wanted, which was freedom and choice and the ability to control my own destiny and a craving for that because I had tasted that in college. Then I just kind of got lucky really, or the right book popped out. I wouldn't say anything lucky. Like at the end of the day, like that's come back to the intuitive sort of like, man, that book is speaking to me. I need to pick that up. Or like, oh man, this person's talking about a fraternity. I need to lean into that. Like, I think that's always been
resonance, right?
Yeah. Like I've been pretty aware of like when I feel curious and I kind of lean into my curiosities and let that sort of drive. And that's still a really big part of who I am today. But I remember that in the very beginning and I remember it just kind of leading down that path and not necessarily letting the outcome or the failure dictate where I was going to go. It was like, oh, I'm going to buy this course on software. Great. Okay, well, I'm going to buy this course on this thing. Oh, whoa, I learned about this. I'm going to buy a course on this. And then naturally that curiosity leading to something that was going to work for me. I wasn't married to the process as much as I was married to the eventual outcome. I was like, I just want to be successful. I don't care if I sell this, or this. Like, I just want something to work. And I think that flexibility gave me a lot of slack to figure it out instead of forcing myself to make one thing work.
Do you mind if I reflect something back here?
Yeah, sure.
So I find it really interesting and really important. I so appreciate you sharing that story. And I think there's so much to take away from that. But because of our relationship and because of the people who I deal with in a day-to-day basis and who I help in the way that I help, I think it's really worth mentioning that you had invested, right? You had purchased all these informational courses, books, doing the things, whether it was Facebook ads or whatever. And I'm curious to how you wound up deciding other than resonance. But rather than going back there right now, what I really want to point out is that, if I'm not mistaken, you found something that sparked your connection to who you are that changed the game for you, opposed to what you can do. And I think that this is something where, as you were talking, it reminded me of a conversation we were having over dinner one day. And I'm not sure if you remember this or not, but we were sitting next to each other and we got to chatting about some things that you were just discovering and you were just learning about that were new to you. And the energy that you had as you were talking about those things, and the enthusiasm and the interest and the awe and wonder of it all, was this pure child energy almost. And you could tell that you were so passionate. But what I got from that was you were so lit up from the inside about the expansion that you got to experience knowing about this brand new thing that was new to you. Right. And then you would go down that path. And I think that's something that really makes you very special. And I think that that's a quality that successful founders have as well. That it's one of the key differences, I think, between people who are chasing after something and the people who are embracing, expanding, and allowing what they know to come, the result that they know for their own experience, opposed to a specific tangible goal, if you will.
I think there's, I appreciate you saying that, by the way. I fully receive that. I think it's important to recognize that there's two sides of the story, right? There's discipline and saying that you're going to do something and then sticking something all the way through. And then there's surrender, which is being able to pivot when things aren't going well or when things aren't working. Now, I think that balance is something that some people are more natural at than others. Like some people are more natural at being able to pivot and intuitively know what's going to happen. Some people are very, very, very skilled at being disciplined and sticking down and figuring it out along the way. And I think for me, the thing that really reinforced that from the start, like when I started getting curious about things and I started trying to do things, every single time I would buy a course, like I remember the first course I bought was how do you start a software company from scratch? That was the first course I bought, right? The inside of that course, they asked us to cold call a bunch of people and ask them about their biggest pains, because once you find out their biggest pains, you can create something to fix it for them. So that made me curious enough to make a cold call, which I was absolutely terrified of doing. Oh my God, was I scared to do that? I was so scared. I cannot tell you, I've never been as scared as anything as I was about that first cold call that I made. I was forced to do it, actually. I was in an accountability group that told me hey, if you don't do this, you're going to have to shave your head or something. I don't remember what the bet was, but I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. So I remember begrudgingly getting on the phone, calling. And when I called, the guy picked up and I was really nervous. I was like, hey man, I just want to ask you a couple questions. And he's like, dude, I'm busy right now. Can you call me back in 2 hours? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And then he hung up. And I remember that experience, literally, I didn't care if he couldn't talk to me. I was filled with energy because the thing that I thought was so terrifying ended up not being terrifying at all. It was actually this liberating feeling of just expansion. And I think that one experience really early on, now that I'm thinking about it, was so important, that set the tone for the conversations we had and the energy that maybe you were noticing. It's just that all the things that I thought were terrifying and things that I couldn't do, when you truly lean into it and you have the courage to just go and just try, most oftentimes, 99.999% of the time, there's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors, and it's actually not the worst outcome. The fear makes it hard to stick through. But if you can train yourself to not be afraid, and you just, and in every moment, it's oh my God, those things that I was afraid of actually had no merit. So I'm actually way more powerful than I give myself credit for. And when that compounds over time, it creates a snowball effect where you have more confidence in your ability to go from discipline to surrender. And then that flexibility, I think, is what creates the ability for you to sort of navigate and dance throughout the different cycles of business. That's something that has come back to me more, especially now with so many different things changing and business plans having to be thrown out the window and new things having to emerge. And I think now all that stuff, those courses I bought, I have no idea how they connected now, but I think every single thing that I was forced to do early on has just set me up now to be better prepared to be the founder I need to be right now.
I love it. So good. Let's fast forward a little bit. We don't have a lot of time left, and I want to touch on a couple more things with you.
Yeah.
So when you started this, then it was about your goals of lifestyle and freedom. And you weren't married to what you were going to sell, just that it was going to sell. And your curiosity and expansion has led you along this amazing path to where you are today, and where Stay Grounded is going and all the different things. Now, you also brought in philanthropy and connecting with Make-A-Wish and supporting them. And I know that Java Press is a company that's a force for good, and that's a part of your value. When did that come in? What was the awareness you had going from, hey, we're selling a product, it's doing well, to going, hey, we want to make a difference too in this other way?
So I remember, so we launched September 2015, right out the gate making sales. Like within 3 months, I was making sales. I was thrilled. I was excited. I mean, I was like, wow, this is actually making me money. I remember getting my first sale and just being like, I fell asleep and I made money. Like, this is the best. I remember having that excitement and just really being there. And then January of 2016, I had a mentor who worked 37 years at the same company, a guy named Jerry Markowitz. He was my cubicle mate. He was 3 months away from retirement, and he had a heart attack 3 months for his retirement date. Just remember that like sort of period, a really kind of blended together period. Like I can't even like separate any month from that. I remember, the only thing I remember was right after he died, his wife came in the next week to clean out his cubicle. She was taking out all his stuff and she was learning stuff about him. And you could just tell that like she was just so sad that she hadn't taken the time to spend with him when she could. And he had worked so much. And I just saw this honestly, I saw like a flash forward in some ways. Like, Raj, if you stay on this path, that's going to be you. And then I had a bigger realization: if my parents stay on this path, that's going to be them. If my friends stay on this path, that's going to be them. So I had this kind of big realization that everyone around me was constantly waiting for another date to finally do what they always wanted to do. And I remember that moment just kind of sparking it for me. I was like, man, I really don't care. I'm just going to make this work. And so I put my head down and I worked for 8 months, just really hard, early mornings before work, after work, learning. I just so dedicated. We ended up hitting our first 6 figures by the end of the year. And I was so confused because I thought that I was working so hard to make all this stuff happen, and I was not happy. I had paid off my student loans. I was sending my parents money. I thought all these things that I was like doing things for, I had this BS. I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing it for this. I'm doing it for that. No, I wasn't doing it for that. I was doing it because I was running from something inside me and I had no idea what it was. And I remember at the end of that year, I went to a conference called the Underground Marketing Conference. It doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be run by a guy named Yannick Silver. And Yannick, he's also like the founder of a mastermind group called Maverick. And his whole sort of philosophy is like, you can be in business and do good at the same time. Evolved enterprise is what he called it. And at the time he had just written his book. Now I'm at this conference and I'm around all these other entrepreneurs that are giving back and doing business at the same time. And they were hinging around this idea of evolved enterprise. I had no idea what the hell that was. Because I was always under the impression that you had to, like, once you make your money, then you can start your philanthropy. So I remember he gave away a copy of the book. I read the book same way that I did the 4-hour work week, like cover to cover in a day. And then I was like, oh my God, I need this guy. And so I ended up buying his course, got involved in his community. Really, the book was teaching self-awareness. Stop looking outside for your answers, go inside. I remember at the end of that, I had finally come to the realization like, wow, this thing became successful because right after Jerry died, I worked really hard to make this happen. Jerry's death had a profound impact on the way that I lived, on the way. It was just one of the most motivating factors I could have ever had. It was like a slice of, like, the universe delivered something to me and it turned into some sort of a fuel. And I realized the reason I was doing that so hard is because I didn't want anyone else in my life to think that they were stuck where they were stuck. I wanted to be an example, and that was strong enough motivation to do it. And so from that is where Stay Grounded emerged. Initially, it came out as a way for us to use my coffee company as a way to sell this message of like, you don't have to wait to be happy. You can stay grounded in the moments you love right now. So it started off as a tagline. So January of 2017, rebranded the site, changed it to helping people stay grounded. We help people stay grounded through the coffee they love. Like that's really what it was. And I just started spreading this message because it was mine and I believed in it. Started out as a newsletter. One of our audience members reached out to me and was like, hey, dude, I love your emails. It's so great, so positive. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I was like, kind of. I had it like on my little vision board of like, what is Stay Grounded? Stay Grounded. It's a podcast. It's a movement. It's all these things written, but I didn't really know what the hell I wanted. And then that's how that came to be. So launched the podcast at the end of that year. And that started a whole new journey of learning and growing and being around people that were expanding my own sense of what's possible in life and in spirituality and in business and love and just being a human being. I was really kind of expanding what's possible in life. Yeah, it changed my life and it grew and now it's in 70 something countries and it's doing its own thing. It's kind of crazy to when you tell the story from start to finish, but really it all started with Jerry's passing. Like if Jerry hadn't passed, I don't think I would have had the motivation to figure it out so quickly. And in me figuring it out so quickly, I don't think I would have crashed. And without me crashing, I wouldn't have taken the time to actually reflect and figure out who I was and what really inspired me. And from there is when Stay Grounded came. And then once I had defined Stay Grounded, then the charity element was like just another, like Make-A-Wish ended up coming into our lives. Like I wanted to help people stay grounded in the moments they love. And I looked at these kids, and these kids had billionaires lining up to give them anything they wanted. But all these kids wanted, 90% of the kids, all they wanted was a Chuck E. Cheese party. They wanted to go to Disney World with their family. They wanted a bedroom makeover. It was the simplest things. And I just remember being in there. I was like, oh my God, more people need to be reminded of the fact that joy is not something that's found outside of us. It's something that's found in these little moments. And so that's how Stay Grounded then inspired Make-A-Wish. That's kind of how it came to be. It just came into be as the more clear I got on what I wanted and what I stood for, the easier it became to just say yes and no to the things that were going to allow us to spread this message with more heart.
So beautiful and such a great place to put a pin in this. I wish we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, not during this episode. We've already gone quite long, and I love that we have so much value, so many great nuggets, and such a beautiful way to share more of who you are with the world and what your mission and message is. And so before we hop off, I would love two things. One, let my listeners know if they want to get more of this great stuff, what specifically would you like them to do? And number two, final words of wisdom, and then we will say goodbye for now.
I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this interview. If you're listening this far in, that means that something I was saying or we were saying has resonated. So I appreciate your attention. I'm all over social. So, I'm most active on Instagram. So, if you're on Instagram, Raj_Jana, you can listen to the Stay Grounded podcast. That's on iTunes, Stitcher, it's on Spotify, it's all over the place. So you can just look up Stay Grounded with Raj Jana. Either of those are great places to start. If I had to leave with one piece of advice, I think in this climate right now, and I don't know when this is going to air, but in this moment, in the middle of a global pandemic and everything that's happening, I think it's more important than ever to remember how powerful the human spirit is. I think that we don't give ourselves credit for being a species that has survived 60,000 years, that has gone through holocausts and gone through wars and plagues. The amount of things that we as a human species have been able to grow from and emerge from is incredible. And I think we forget how powerful we really are, and we get caught up in the nuances and the pains and the suffering and the problems that come from being stuck inside of crisis. But crisis only exists to remind us of how powerful we actually are. It forces us to dig and bring out the pieces of our heart and our soul and our spirits that normally have been dormant or have been sleeping for so long. So don't be afraid of life or chaos. Chaos, we are a part of nature, right? We come from nature, and the carpet's finally matching the drapes. So at the end of the day, lean into it and don't be afraid. Because if you can practice courage now, then you can do just about anything.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And there you have it. Thanks again for tuning in. I do realize that there are about a million other things you could have been doing over the past half hour, and the fact that you chose to spend it listening to this podcast means the world to me. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway from today's episode was, so feel free to send it on social, tagging me at the Nicole Holland on Facebook or Instagram, or send me a message from my website, fascinatingfounders.com. You'll also find show notes with the transcript from this and all other past and future podcast episodes on the website. That URL once more is fascinatingfounders.com. Thanks to my podcasting goldmine team for the production of today's episode, and a special shout out to Effie Ceruti for composing the intro and outro music for this season. If you're looking for custom composed music for your own podcast, or any other aspect of strategy, design, or production for your existing or new podcast, the Podcasting Goldmine team can help. Give us a ring at 218-GET-SEEN or contact us through the website for a custom quote. And once again, if you are ready to explore effectively leveraging podcasts for business growth, visit podcastinggoldmine.com and request a complimentary consultation to explore making podcasts work for you. Again, that URL is podcastinggoldmine.com. Coming up on Fascinating Founders, I'm excited to introduce you to more fascinating men and women who've taken their inspired idea and against all odds have grown it into a multi-million or billion-dollar enterprise. Until next time, this is Nicole Holland signing off.